She speaks pidgin, people. Like she said Oya and it was perfect. I'm serious. Like I was like, no, come on, say something. And she did. But this was a pretty good episode about, nature versus nurture. Aakansha has lived in Nigeria, she's lived in India. Like she's literally born in India, moved to Nigeria, moved back to India, then moved to Australia. But let's listen to her tell her story herself. Enjoy, people. Before I ask you the question, I'll just tell you a story. So
Okay.
I grew up in Nigeria, but my father used to be a lecturer, and I had a ton of Indian friends, with older Indian friends like you, like your story, who the parents had moved from India to Nigeria, and my dad's job there. What part of what he was doing then was they would be like, "Hey, Professor Ben, can my kids come to your house so you can teach them? They're prepping for some exams." So he was helping them teach them English and stuff like that. This was back in Ahmadu University, Zaria. But tell me
Mm.
about you moved to Nigeria as a 3-year-old. Like, tell me about that journey for you.
Yeah,
Like,
I was.
what you remember actually. Like, why I'm asking that.
Oh, actually, so I moved in Nigeria. Well, sorry, I was in year one. I actually moved in 2001. My dad moved in 2000, checked out the space, saw if the job was steady, and then he got all of us back in there. My first experience, what he tells me, is that I was hailing and crying because nobody looked the same. And I was like, really, Dad? It's like, yeah, it was strange for you because it was a whole another vibe. Because living
Yeah.
in Nigeria, I used to live in Lagos,
Yes.
right? So it was a whole another vibe in 2001, if you remember. And, you know, and we had so much help around us. And it was almost quite, it was very new. I was starting my whole school life. And because I was so young, I feel that I did not take a lot of time to adapt to the new surroundings. I made it like my home. So Nigeria has actually been the first home that I've ever known for me and for my brother. Like, Pidgin English might be our first language,
I just
really. Yeah.
wait. You just speak pidgin. Let me be clear.
Oh, yeah.
Are you
And
serious?
you can't think this sister can speak in Pidgin English. Come on now. I make pepper and yam chips in my house
Oh,
every other day. My very Australian husband has even suggested we should start a pepper business in Adelaide,
are you
just so
serious?
because it is so yummy. I'm not gonna lie. I
Oh,
have a
that's
lot of
so cool.
Nigeria in me.
So yeah, so like childhood Nigeria, and then I
Yeah,
think you moved. Yeah.
I did my schooling in Nigeria. There was an Indian school set up, so was mostly surrounded by a lot of Indian students, but we had a lot of Nigerian teachers. All my neighbors were Nigerian, and I actually found it as as my first cultural learning, like how to greet people, how to, like, with Nigerians, the first thing that you can learn, because I've just visited so many countries, is they're very hospitable and very respectful, and you don't see that in the common tongue everywhere else. I mean, it's not seen a lot, and I do not know where that comes from in the culture, but it's it's my home, it's my fatherland.
Like, this is like I have I'm just grading, to be honest. Like, you know
It is
why
literally it's the first
yeah,
national anthem I learned, not India's.
because it's so like whenever I see when I see the Indian kids back home in Nigeria, I'll be like, I wonder how these kids are settling in to their new country. Because I know daddy came to work and then our mommy came to work. And so, you came with daddy and mommy. You had no
Hmm.
choice in that call.
No.
Now, I know you did move back to India at some point.
Yeah. So I moved back in like year after year 10, and that was mostly around my education because there was just the one Indian school, and well, I'm not tooting my own horn, but I was acing my exams quite well, and my principal said to my dad, like, you need to send her back to India where she can give in more competitive exams and have more students to compete with in different walks of life, which made sense. It's just like, yeah, sure thing, because at the end of the day, I was either going to move to either US, UK, or I'd stay in India. So my parents decided to send me back to India, which felt like an immigration journey because I was sort of like, it was a country that I would visit like 2 weeks in a year.
yeah.
But now that I have to stay there for the whole time, it was a change I actually did not like.
You missed
I
Pepe.
loved, I love Pepe. My dad used to still work in Nigeria, so every now and then he would bring to India Pepe. He would like funnily say, "I'm gonna smuggle some Pepe and some coffee," because he would go to like Ghana and get me my favorite coffee, and he would like get me my favorite peanuts. And trust me, so in Nigeria we used to be in crazy amounts of traffic during school hours, right?
Yeah.
So you'd see those okadas with those
Yeah.
peanuts, and those used to be my favorite snacks. And my dad used to be like, "Those are the same kind of peanuts you get everywhere." I'm like, "No, go get stuck in a traffic, find an okada that's selling those peanuts, and can you please get me those peanuts? Those are different kinds of peanuts." But he would often get me a lot of things from Nigeria, and he still does to this date. So he gets me stuff and gets me jewelry, gets me clothes, gets me all of the things from Nigeria even to this date.
You said something about how moving to India was the immigration journey itself. Like, so the first
Yeah.
moving to Nigeria as a kid was just moving, like you're a kid.
Yeah.
Now moving to India, like, so what were you struggling with at that point in time? Like, because you were an
Oh,
Indian school, Indian community in a way, but I
yeah.
mean, I guess like still Nigerian.
Still Nigerian, very much. Like, because in Nigeria, the school, even though we were all students, we Indian students, but we'd all grew up in Nigeria. So our thought process matched a lot. The way we thought about things, the way we spoke about things. And even, a lot of us, we used to have this pidgin English slang even while we spoke, right? Because this is how we grew up.
Yeah.
And going to India, the food became different, the people became different, and they really couldn't like relate to you.
Mm.
Because the things that we grew up with, they did not grow up with. And it
Yeah.
was just very hard to connect. Like you had to dig deep into your Indianness, or maybe just get some more just to fit in. So I
Mm.
always found it very hard to fit in. I mean, even in Nigeria, I'd say, because I went on to play basketball in Nigeria for the Nigerian team, for Lagos team, and I was one of two Indians out of this team of 16. Um, well, a lot of people had this, you know, disparity, like, oh, you don't look it. No, you're not it. You know, you get that thing that you're not. you're not as strong. Nigerians are strong, man. You're not strong enough. You're not Nigerian enough. And, they'll still question you whether you're from here or not. Where we did feel like it. But in India, I felt like, oh, I have to prove myself to be how Indian I am. So, and especially during the teenage years, kids are mean.
Mm.
It was quite different, like the study, the culture, the way people think about education. It's very, very, very different. It's all a competition, and it's a very hard competition in India. A lot of it due to its population.
Yeah.
People are not people. People are not struggling after. Everyone is after getting the first rank, but nobody is taking a step back and analyzing, what am I actually learning? What am I learning this for? Like, it's just a race, a mindless race, which I understand there has to be when there's such a huge competition, there's yet such a huge population to, compete with. But there's no slowing down. So I actually struggled with the number of people around me. I struggled with the number of times people would tell me, like, you gotta get along with the rat race of things, and try to be part of the rat race, and I got thrown off. I genuinely struggled a lot more in my own home country than I thought I would in Australia or even in Nigeria. So it was very hard to be the Indian. Ah,
That's something.
not a
I
yeah,
get it. It makes sense actually, because it's really interesting how, despite the cultural background we are born with,
hmm,
that nature, this is just a nature versus nurture thing. So there's nature. Indian, born
yeah,
in India, moved to Nigeria as a little kid,
hmm,
raised in Nigeria, then moves back to India. And then you start to
yeah.
find out that
Hey, I'm
nature
not Indian
doesn't
enough.
work because nurture won, really. So
No,
Nigeria nurtured you. And so you're Nigerian Indian, or you're
yeah,
almost like, I almost feel like, so I have this thing, I call immigrants the in-betweeners. Because I
yeah,
feel like we're always in between. And
yeah,
the more countries you move to and live in, you literally find that you're in between all those countries. You're never, so for example, I would dare say to you that you never really feel fully Indian. You never really feel fully Nigerian. You never really feel like you're full, complete Australian. You
yeah,
you just find that you're somewhere in between all those cultures. You can relate with them in a way, but every now and then you just can't seem to fully be like them. I don't know. I don't know how to describe. It's just a thing I
but
see.
like, I have felt this all of my life. And I felt that this was a disadvantage to have, that I never fully belonged anywhere. But it's actually a strength.
Yes. Yes, it is.
You become so versatile. You become so relatable. You become so, like, in like crazy terms, exotic to the normal folks. They're like, "Oh my god, you're like a peacock. You've been to so many places." And Dozie, I lived in Nigeria for about 10 years. I lived in India for about 7 after that. I'm not counting the earlier 3 or 5 years that I was born, because that's more
That
important
was
to my
baby. That
parents.
was baby. Yeah, that was your parents own that. Yeah, let's leave
My
that.
parents own that. My parents own that period of time. But 7 years in India, and then now 4 years in Australia. I've actually found that coming to Australia was like a relief.
Are you serious?
Yes, because Australia is the country of immigrants
Mm.
from day one. Like, although I am actually married to a native Australian, but most of the population is immigrants at some point or the other. Either they're fourth generation, fifth generation, second generation, first. But everyone comes from a different ethnic background. And it's so easy to find relatability in a place where everybody has had the similar journey of coming from a different country and setting base in Australia. So there is not just one, but it's like a mini India in a way, where in India you have different religions and different castes and different cultures residing in the same country. Here you have different ethnicities and different races in the same country. And they're all making it just the one based on, you know, yes, we find you relatable. You moved here. You don't know enough about your own culture. You're making it your own and you're starting afresh. So, or how you developed coming into the new country. So, in a way, everybody over here is a little bit more confident and a little bit more stronger, and which I felt like went so very well appreciated. That when you talk to people, say, lived in Nigeria for a couple of years, lived in India for a couple of years, and then came here, and like, oh my god, you have to tell us more. And I didn't think that there was more to tell about it, but I'm like, yeah, I moved, but they're like, no, and they want to know about it. And even on the phone, you're talking about different cultures. Your accent also doesn't stay true to one country. I initially, but just before I got my employment into my construction industry, I worked in um, a telecommunication service, a call center.
Yeah.
And my biggest icebreaker with anybody would be they just guess where I'm from. Because they can't make do. Whether I don't have a very Indian accent, I don't have a very Nigerian accent. Somebody thinks that I might be even South African. So, like, because of moving to all of these different countries, my accents changed to a very unique one where, I mean, that's because of it. So I think it's a very good strength and a very good quality that thanks to my dad has
Yeah.
developed. Yeah.
I agree. I totally agree. I mean, my take on that in between is that it's a strength more than a weakness. It's
Yes.
because you have the ability to take the best of all the worlds and meld it into something that is very different. It doesn't exist. Like it doesn't exist. Like it's
Unique.
you're creating it. You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
You know. And there's something you say that it just got me thinking about. Like the world is probably just a food place of immigrants, or rather, what's the right way to say this? Like the world is just an immigrant journey in itself because people have
Yeah.
moved across continents and stuff. Like we've always been moving as a people. We've just
Very much.
politicized this of recent, but literally the world has always been a place of immigrants. People move from one continent to the other or one country to the other. I mean, for different reasons, But
Yeah. I mean, it's the world's becoming a smaller and smaller place.
yeah,
So, and it's so easy to get from one place to the other. And there's so many countries that are calling people for skill shortages. And, there are different requirements in different countries, and they're not just secluding themselves to the country they're living in. People are reaching out far and beyond. I mean, it's a lot. I think a lot of it has started because of the multinationals, where people are employing people from one country, giving them opportunities, giving them exposure. And a part of it, I think it's become the norm in a lot of countries to give that sort of exposure.
yeah,
because that makes you more versatile, makes you more valuable. People are not, I don't think, even in the employment, I talked about personal, but I'm now going to talk about the professional and employment bit.
Yeah.
People don't want to employ people who've just had a one single tracked life. Like, we want experiences. We want to see how you battle through adversity. We want to see how you battle through changes. And that is what like makes you a little bit more employable in a way as well. People who have gone through things in their life. And that is why I often, like with my younger siblings and all the young children that I tell, take risks.
Yeah.
Do things which you'd never normally do. Like, I'm not one for taking risks, but my parents that actually helped me to push me, in that direction. And I did not even know at the time that I was actually taking a risk. But take risks. Move to a different place. Live without your parents.
Yeah.
Get out of the blanket. And the way you deal with things will be so different. It might appear nothing to you at the time, but 5 years down the track, when you talk about it, you're going to get such a wave of appreciation for yourself that the way you handled yourself, the way you grew, will be magnanimous.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that term, get out of the blanket. Yeah. Get out of the blanket. It's
Yeah.
so easy to just get like, you know what? I'm just going to cuddle up. But no, just get
No,
out.
yeah. Well, it has been my first thought to go back to mama every time I moved. Like, Ma, what have I come to this? When did I become so old to do this by myself? But no, it's just you need a support from that blanket. You want that blanket to exist, but it can be far away from you. It's okay.
Yes.
It
It
is
is okay.
existing, but it's not on you.
I think the last question I have for you is more like talking about, if you think about heritage or your heritage, like what do you think you have going for you between, like, you literally live in 3 countries now, and what's
Yeah.
the thing you think that has remained constant across 3 countries, like in terms of your heritage from as an I want to say you're an Indian, but I'm not sure you're an Indian. I think you're like a Nigerian, Australian. But yeah, like what's the one thing that
Yeah.
has stayed constant with you all till now, and now you're married to an Australian? Like, just what's the
Yeah.
one thing?
In terms of like how I translate heritage, a lot of people take it back to their religions a lot of the time, from where they come from or their ancestry. Um, my name's Aakansha Jain. So Jain, I come from Jainism, which is a minority religion itself. Um, to be very honest, I won't say I'm an atheist, but I practiced a lot of the religion because of my mom. And the only one thing that I have learned and carried throughout all of these my journey through all of these 3 countries is, you know, religion, the proclivity of religion in a certain area or the way it is practiced in a certain area changes every 500 kilometers. And you it's the way you pray, the way you preach changes. And what's the one common thing you find between the people you interact with, the people of your own religion and the people of the same ancestry, is that everybody's working towards human service. Everyone is striving to do good deeds, to be good, to be a good person. And that is something which I've talked to my husband as well. Like, what are we gonna tell our kids about? Like, my parents told me about the religion, that because they have practiced, they've lived in India all their lives, like for a good 30 years of their lives before moving.
Yeah.
So they have like a good cultural foundation. My cultural foundation has changed. My foundation is from 3 different countries.
Yeah.
So what do I take? Well, I give them what I've learned. Versatility. I'll tell them about 5 million religions that I've come across, or the 5 million different temples that I visited. So I practiced architecture. So I would often go to different places of worship just to probably study on how the buildings were made. But I also ended up learning a little bit about the culture, where the ancestry of this religions come from, or how this religion began in the first place. And I found such beauty in the diversity of things that I've seen that I'd probably get them to explore everything. But at the end of it, just be a good person, do good deeds, be nice to people, and stay true to yourself. That is literally all my heritage. Because just all I've seen is goodness.
Mm.
And when people say, yes, there's chaos here, there's this here, but it's all a part of your experience. You would never see the goodness in things if there was not enough worse things in the world. You wouldn't realize the importance of the goodness if there wasn't its opposite existing, right?
Yeah.
So I'd always my foundation is, it's okay to change. It's okay to embrace change. And it's okay to change your beliefs as and when you move through life. My heritage is very diverse.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh, of course.
Thank you. That was beautiful. I mean, that's actually a really good way to consider one's heritage, especially when you live across countries. And you're so right about how a lot of us think of heritage and we start to instantly map religion, ancestry, all those things to heritage, and we think that that's what it is. But there are a ton of things.
Yeah.
Like, you're going through life, and things are changing as you're going through life, right?
Yeah. A lot of people think that heritage, for my parents, their heritage starts from the time their parents moved to India, like after the partition, and then had their first house and all of that. My heritage starts from Lagos.
Yeah.
The first house we lived in, I still remember the addresses. And I take my kids back there, right? To the house that I lived in India, the first homes that I lived in India. My ancestry is never good. My heritage is never going to match my parents.
Yeah.
People need to understand this fact. Yes, my heritage would be related to them, but it won't match it.
Hmm.
Each person's heritage, each person's ancestry changes.
I should end this here because this is too good.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just going to end it at this point, and I'll say thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so
Sorry,
much.
I've just been going on.
As always, thank you so much. If you have someone who you think should listen to this, please share with them, I beg. If you know someone you think I should talk to, please just send their name, send me a LinkedIn message, a Twitter message, or you can just send me a message and say, hey, I think you should talk to this person. They have a great story. Besides that, please follow us on Substack, like our videos on YouTube, subscribe. Thank you again, and have a beautiful day.